The heavy revolving doors of the Blackwell and Associates private bank didn't just move. They glided with a silent, expensive precision. When Marcus pushed through them, the contrast was so sharp it felt like a physical collision. Outside, the New York City heat was a thick, humid blanket smelling of exhaust and hot asphalt. Marcus belonged out there. He was a 12-year-old boy in a t-shirt 3 sizes too big, stained with the gray dust of a construction site where he'd been scavenging for scrap metal. His sneakers were a tragedy of duct tape and frayed laces, leaving faint, dusty footprints on a floor that was carved from single slabs of Italian Calacatta marble. Inside, the air was chilled to a perfect 68 degrees and smelled of expensive lilies and old, untouchable money. The contrast hook in Marcus's story isn't just about clothes. It's about the collision of 2 different universes. In one universe, people spend more on a silk tie than Marcus's mother earned in a month of scrubbing floors. In the other, a 12-year-old boy has to decide between buying a loaf of bread or a pack of Band-Aids for his sister's scraped knee. When these 2 worlds meet, the tension is immediate. The audience doesn't just watch, they hold their breath. They want to know, how did he get past the doorman? Why is he here? And how long until the gods of this gold leaf temple cast him back into the gutter? Richard Blackwell, the bank's managing director, was the personification of that high society world. He sat behind a desk made of polished mahogany that looked like it cost more than a suburban house. To Richard, Marcus wasn't a child. He was an eyesore. He was a smudge on a masterpiece. "I just want to check my balance," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. He held out a black card with trembling fingers that were tipped with dirt under the nails. Richard didn't just reject him. He made a performance of it. He leaned back, his $10,000 watch catching the light of the crystal chandelier, and let out a laugh that was as cold as the marble floor. He looked at the high-net-worth clients in the lobby, inviting them to share the joke. "Your balance, kid," Richard sneered, his voice dripping with the casual cruelty of the elite. "What's the balance of a lemonade stand these days? Or did you find that card in the trash while looking for your dinner?" This is the peak of the hook, the high-stakes visual contrast. On one side of the desk, you have a man who represents the pinnacle of arrogance, bathed in luxury. On the other, a boy who represents the ultimate underdog, covered in the literal dirt of the streets. The power dynamic is so lopsided that the viewer's brain demands justice. We stay because we are waiting for the snap. We are waiting for the moment the dirty kid proves he belongs in the room more than the man in the suit. The snap happened when Richard, wanting to finalize the humiliation, swiped the card. He expected to see an access denied message or a balance of $0.00. Instead, the screen flickered, and a string of numbers appeared that made Richard's heart skip a beat. Asterisk 47,302,901 ties. Asterisk, the silence that followed was louder than his laughter. The contrast had shifted. The dirt on Marcus' face was no longer a sign of poverty. It was a badge of the secret he carried. The dirty kid was now the most powerful person in the room, and the millionaire banker was suddenly the one looking very, very small. The true weight of the $47 million wasn't in the gold bars it could buy or the mansions it could build. The weight was in the calluses on Linda's hands. Hands that Marcus remembered being perpetually red, chapped from industrial-strength bleach and the biting winter wind. Linda was an invisible protagonist. In a city like New York, people like her are the ghosts of the infrastructure. They move through office buildings when the lights are dimmed, emptying trash bins filled with the discarded memos of millionaires and scrubbing the coffee rings off mahogany desks. To Richard Blackwell, she hadn't been a person. She was a utility, like the electricity or the plumbing. She was the woman who made sure his workspace was pristine by 8 a.m., a shadow that disappeared before the important people arrived. But while Richard saw a servant, Marcus saw a warrior. The heart of this story isn't the bank balance. It's the quiet, grueling sacrifice of a mother who turned her invisibility into a superpower. Linda knew that in Richard's world, she didn't exist. She knew that her son, walking in her footsteps, would be looked at with the same disdain. So, she decided to play a long game, a game of decades, every night for 10 years. After Marcus and his sister Emma fell asleep in their cramped one-bedroom apartment, Linda didn't rest. She sat at the small kitchen table under a flickering bulb, surrounded by pamphlets on life insurance, compound interest, and trust funds. She was a woman who barely finished high school, yet she was teaching herself the complex language of the wealthy. She wasn't doing it to get rich. She was doing it to ensure her children never had to be invisible again. The emotional connection peaks when James Morrison, the senior manager, realizes the origin of the money. He doesn't see a lucky windfall. He sees a life traded for a future. Every dollar in that account represented an hour of sleep Linda gave up. Every cent was a meal she skipped, a coat she didn't buy, a bus she didn't take because she chose to walk 5 miles in the rain to save the fare. When Marcus stands in that bank, dirty and shivering from the air conditioning, he is the living embodiment of her struggle. The invisible protagonist is finally seen through her legacy. The revelation that she cleaned these very floors adds a layer of poetic justice that hits the audience in the gut. The banker, who thinks he is the master of the building, was actually being supported by the woman he looked down upon. She was smarter than him, more disciplined than him, and infinitely more powerful. Linda's sacrifice turns a cold financial hook into a tribute to maternal love. It forces the viewer to look at the invisible people in their own lives, the janitors, the street sweepers, the bus drivers, and realize that behind every dirty face might be a story of Herculean effort. As Marcus cries in the conference room, he isn't crying because he's rich. He's crying because he finally understands the depth of his mother's silence. She never complained about the back pain or the stinging chemicals. She kept the secret because she wanted him to remember her as a mother, not as a martyr. The $47 million wasn't a bank balance. It was a love letter written in sweat and ironclad will. Linda had spent her life making sure the world was clean for men like Richard, only to ensure that her son would one day own the world itself. The silent middle finger is not about a gesture. It is about a revelation. In the world of high finance, power is measured by the sharpness of a suit and the prestige of an office. Richard Blackwell believed he held all the cards because he owned the building, the air conditioning, and the silence. But the moment that $47 million appeared on the screen, the hierarchy of the room didn't just shift, it collapsed. This is the ultimate moral victory. It is the moment the help becomes the owner. For years, Linda had walked these halls with a mop and a bucket. She was the woman who stayed out of the way, who kept her head down, and who absorbed the subtle insults of men like Richard without a word of protest. Richard likely walked past her hundreds of times, never once making eye contact, treating her as a ghost that cleaned up his messes. He assumed she was poor because she was lazy or lacked the intellect to navigate his world. The bank balance was her silent response. Every dollar in that account was a calculated strike against the arrogance of the elite. While Richard was busy projecting an image of success through leased cars and expensive watches, Linda was quietly building a fortress. She didn't need the flashy office or the nameplate. She used the very system that marginalized her to outmaneuver the men who ran it. She understood compound interest, trust structures, and insurance payouts better than the experts, because for her, the stakes weren't a year-end bonus. They were her children's lives. When the screen lit up with those 8 digits, it was a silent middle finger to every person in that lobby who had laughed. It was a message to the woman in the pearl necklace and the man in the 3-piece suit. The woman you thought was beneath you was actually supporting you. And now, her son owns your attention. The beauty of this justice is its quietness. Marcus didn't have to scream. He didn't have to insult Richard. He didn't even have to demand respect. The sheer reality of the numbers did the work for him. The satisfaction for the audience comes from watching Richard's mask of perfection crumble. He is forced to realize that his judgment was flawed, his superiority was an illusion, and his predatory nature was directed at a child who is now his most significant legal obligation. This theme resonates because it taps into a universal human desire to see the humble exalted and the arrogant humbled. It proves that discipline and love are more powerful than status and greed. Linda didn't want Marcus to walk into that bank and start a fight. She wanted him to walk in and end one. By the time the manager led Marcus away, the atmosphere in the lobby had changed. The air felt heavier for Richard. He looked at his polished mahogany desk and realized it was clean because of Linda. He looked at the crystal chandeliers and realized they shone because of her labor. The dirty kid had pulled back the curtain, revealing that the invisible woman was the smartest person to ever walk those marble floors. The $47 million wasn't just wealth. It was a certificate of victory. It was the proof that no matter how much the elite world tries to bury someone, a mother's love and a brilliant mind can build a ladder out of the very dirt they tried to keep her in. Richard stayed in the lobby, surrounded by his gold and glass, but for the first time, he was the one who felt like he didn't belong. The magic of a great story isn't just what happens, it's the order in which you find out. The curiosity-driven pacing of Marcus's story functions like a psychological trap. It's designed to keep the audience leaning in, asking one question after another, until the final piece of the puzzle drops and shatters their expectations. The story starts with the asterisk result, a dirty, duct-taped kid standing in a place he shouldn't be. The hook isn't the bank, it's the contrast. When Marcus whispers that he wants to check his balance, the audience is already hooked on a what if. What if he actually has money? The moment the screen lights up and Richard Blackwell's face turns to stone, the first question is answered, yes, he is rich. But this answer immediately creates a bigger, more urgent question. Asterisk, how? Asterisk, this is where the pacing becomes strategic. Instead of explaining the money right away, the story pivots to the asterisk humiliation. We watch Richard Blackwell, the man who was just laughing, struggle to breathe. We see the socialites in the lobby turn their heads in shame. This middle of the story is the payoff for the audience's anger. We want to see the bully squirm. We want to see the arrogant banker try to process the fact that the street rat is now his boss. By focusing on the emotional fallout, the storyteller creates a tension bridge. The audience is so satisfied by the banker's downfall that they don't realize they are being led deeper into the mystery. If the story had explained the life insurance policy in the first 30 seconds, the tension would have evaporated. You would have a sad story about a hard-working mom, but you wouldn't have a viral narrative. By withholding the how, the storyteller forces the viewer to play detective. Is he a genius hacker? Is he a secret prince? Did he find a lost treasure? Only when the banker is thoroughly humbled and the audience is desperate for logic does the story move to the final stage. Asterisk the revelations. We are taken into the quiet safety of the conference room. The sandwiches, the water, and the kind manager, James, act as a cool-down period. Then, the letter is opened. The pacing slows down here to let the emotions breathe. When we finally learn about Linda, the invisible cleaning lady, the story undergoes a massive transformation. It stops being a story about a lucky kid and starts being a story about a heroic mother. The 10-year plan is the key that unlocks the entire narrative. Suddenly, every detail from the beginning makes sense. The dirt on Marcus's face isn't just poverty. It's the aftermath of his mother's death. The duct tape on his shoes is the reason she was able to afford the $30 monthly insurance premium. The banker's office is the very room she scrubbed to pay for Marcus's future. The social commentary of this story is a mirror held up to society, forcing us to ask a gut-wrenching question. How much of a person's worth do we decide based on the dirt on their skin versus the gold in their pocket? In the Blackwell lobby, human value was measured by the visual audit. Richard Blackwell looked at Marcus and saw a 0. He saw a child whose aesthetic, oversized clothes, grime-streaked face, and duct-taped shoes did not match the architecture of success. In Richard's mind, if you didn't look like money, you didn't have a soul worth respecting. This is the great irony of the narrative. The banker, who is physically clean and mathematically rich, is morally bankrupt. He is a man who uses his power to bully a child for the amusement of a crowd. His character is a hollow shell, polished and expensive, but empty. On the other side of the mahogany desk stands Marcus. By every societal standard, he is worthless. He is a street kid with no home, no parents, and no future. But Marcus is the living legacy of a true hero. His dirt is actually a testament to his character. It is the dust of survival, the grit of a boy who has stepped up to protect his sister, Emma, when the world turned its back on them. The social commentary deepens when we look at Linda, the mother. In our modern world, we often equate high-paying jobs with high intelligence and low-paying jobs with a lack of it. We assume the CEO is a genius and the cleaning lady is unskilled. Linda shatters this stereotype. She was a master of strategy. While Richard Blackwell was managing other people's money for a commission, Linda was managing her own poverty to build an empire. She navigated the complex corridors of the financial world from the outside in, using her invisibility as a shield. She proved that a cleaning lady could outthink a private banker, outplan a financial advisor, and outlove a world that tried to starve her. The irony of worth is finalized when the bank balance is revealed. Suddenly, the lobby full of elite clients feels a shift in the atmosphere. They realize that they weren't laughing at a poor kid. They were laughing at the heir to a fortune larger than many of their own. Their respect shouldn't have been triggered by the $47 million. It should have been there when he first walked through the door. The money didn't change Marcus's value. It only changed their perception of it. This story leaves the audience feeling a mix of inspiration and conviction. It challenges the viewer to look at the dirty people in their own lives. The man collecting trash, the woman cleaning the subway, the kid in the tattered hoodie, and realize that they are often carrying burdens we couldn't lift and secrets we couldn't imagine. The final moral victory isn't that Marcus got rich. It's that the world was forced to see him. It's that the invisible protagonist proved that dignity isn't found in a silk suit, but in the quiet, relentless sacrifice for those you love. Marcus walked out of that bank with millions of dollars, but he left behind something much more valuable. A reminder that the true millionaires of this world are often the ones we refuse to look at. This realization is why people share the story, not because of the bank balance, but because we all want to believe that in the end, character is the only currency that truly matters.